Good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast. Remember, we stream live if you're so inclined, although not this week because I'm in spring training. We'll give you a little peek under the covers. I'm in spring training. Normally, we're live Sundays at 10 p.m. Central, but a lot to get to, as always, here in the Kaufman Corner podcast. We're going to talk about the crack of the bat, the pop of the mitt, and, of course, a conversation with Zack Greinke. We're going to hear a little bit of Zack Greinke, one of my absolute favorite guys to interview. So we're going to talk to Zack Greinke. We'll let you hear a little bit of him from spring training. Also, Ned, inducted into the Royals Hall of Fame, talking about loving your players. Is that really what it was all about for the Royals last time? Is there something about the Rays way that we think will be brought in that can do part of the heavy lifting as well? And we'll talk about the position battles that are going on in spring training. It's all coming your way next here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast. You know, Rany, good Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I come to you from Surprise, Arizona. I come to you from the paper-thin walls of what is the manufacturing of homes in Surprise, Arizona. I mean, I really enjoy getting out here to the desert and knowing I'm out here with Todd Lebo, who works with me at Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. And it's just great to get to know every time Todd rolls over. Even though we're in another room, because that's how the houses are built here in Surprise, Arizona. So this beautiful abode that you see around me is, like, I think was built in about 4 days. I'm pretty sure, based upon construction. But it's Arizona and it's baseball, and the Royals are back at it. So I know lots of people would love to be here talking to Zack Greinke and talking to Matt Quatraro. So far be it from me to complain about the housing conditions.
All I can say while you're down in Arizona, just as a reminder, wear your sunscreen.
I am.
Right? And tell Todd to wear sunscreen too, because Todd shares a hairline with me. And I can tell you from lots of experience, the top of the head gets a lot of sun and a lot of skin cancers up there. So be careful out there, guys.
You know what? I would bring Todd over here and put him in front of the camera and let you see where he has just finished his chemo cream.
Oh, okay. He's already got a head start on the skin cancer prevention. Look at him. All right.
Absolutely. He actually he wears a bucket hat everywhere he goes for full protection. We both sunscreen up. We're literally fresh back from the complex, as I mentioned. We're recording here tonight just because of the schedules, people we've got to go talk to and everything. So we're not coming to you live. Enjoy the chat room. We know we got great listeners and great folks that are always joining us during the Kaufman Corner podcast. So enjoy each other's comments. I can't put them up there because we're on tape, but we literally did just come from the complex. I mean, I feel like I'm gooey with the quantity of sunscreen that I have on.
You have a healthy glow. You have a healthy glow, nonetheless. All right. So.
Yes. Had the hat, sunscreened all up and everything. Yeah, it was great. Listen, we do have a lot that we want to get to. One of the things that we want to get to, of course, is we want to hear what is, and first of all, I want to thank our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. By the way, great response from the Kaufman Corner podcast with GAN Asphalt and Concrete. So thank you very much for everybody. If you do have a business that has any kind of parking lot problems, they can make them disappear. Been doing it since 1994. Full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. It's what they do. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty, and they're hiring, as you heard Curtis tell us in the open, all positions, project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, paid time off, check, insurance. Yep, that's just a little bit of the benefits that are there. Check out ganasphalt.com for more information. But and it was the first time. Usually I'm like sending out everything on social media. I got to actually sit and rock out to the opening music, which I thought was fun. It was great. But let's dive into it. I was thrilled. There's nothing better than you're sitting in the clubhouse, and they have this kind of area where all us media fatties stand around and wait. And as the guys come and go, we've got an hour in the morning where we can talk. And Zack Greinke comes in. I'm like, all right, I can go talk to Zack. And I start heading down the row of lockers, and Zack looks up and he just starts smiling at me. And I was like, it couldn't have been better, because like I'm smiling at him, because one of my favorite people on planet Earth to talk to is Zack Greinke. And he's got like Sam Ellinger, who now handles all the PR for the Royals, did something we haven't done before. They created like a for lack of a better term, a yearbook page with all the players and coaches and everything for us to see. So it's like, hey, we got new people, and here's what Brian Sweeney looks like. Here's what Matt Quatraro looks like. And it was very helpful. It was great. Unbeknownst to me at the time, like I'm looking at him like, okay, that's this, that's that. He gave the players one for the media. So I'm walking towards Zack, and Zack's looking at this. He just looks up at me and starts smiling, and he goes, "You're right here." Yeah, I go, well, that's like maybe 30 pounds ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe less. Like it's an older photo. It's the same photo the Royals use on all my credentials.
I was going to say, you didn't sit down to take do a photo shoot with the Royals last week.
No, but it's just great. His wry smile and everything. I just love talking to him. And if people want to catch it this week, we'll be playing the whole interview with Zack. There's a lot of nuance to it that I'll give you. But like spring training with Zack Greinke back, it is Zack. I love talking to Zack. I think he's absolutely priceless. And so I wanted to give you just a little bit of a preview. I'll do the whole interview later on the radio show. But just, Zack kind of talking about the modern era pitching. The guy's been around basically 20 years, right? So he goes a long way back. This is a couple of minutes long. This is Zack talking about, how pitching's changed and just where it all is with the analytics, the data, the video. Here's Zack just a little bit ago here at spring training.
It's made it a lot easier to be good, I guess, for the average person. Like, it was kind of neat 20 years ago, even like 10-ish years ago. You just kind of just kept throwing and trying stuff, and you had no idea really if it was how detailed it was, and you just hopefully stumble onto something. Where now the coaching's just gotten so good and the data has gotten so good, it's a lot easier to find the proper training. Where before it was just way different. So like when you found something, you kind of found it on your own, and now it's just the info's out there so easy for everyone to find.
Do you dive into a lot of it? Do you find that there's so much you can kind of get overwhelmed? Like you go down a rabbit hole and like, all right, hang on. At some point, I still got to just throw strikes.
Yeah, there you can, especially at first, you could get overwhelmed, I guess, and you can make it as complicated as you want. But most guys are capable of understanding. There's some like main things that you got to know. And that could be pretty simple, and it's kind of all you need to know, but you could make it more complicated. It probably takes you back a couple steps in order to go forward when you take it that deep.
Are you a guy that likes the scouting reports, or, like, hey, I know this guy's weaknesses, that's a big part of what you do? Or do you just say, hey, I do what I do and it'll be effective no matter what his supposed weaknesses are?
So even 5 years ago, knowing their weakness was like a huge way of getting guys out, like kind of before your time. So like 20 years ago when I first came in, people thought they knew the hitter's weaknesses, but a lot of times they were wrong. They just would watch them and be like, oh, he hit a home run on this pitch one time, and they remember that. And it could have been a lucky thing, or they didn't really know. And like 5 years ago to 15 years ago, you could actually find out where their holes were, and people didn't necessarily know that's where their holes were. So you kind of had a step ahead. But now that's kind of moved away from being a scouting process because it's so easy to figure out, and there's other ways to do better than to try to always find the hitter's weakness.
I mean, the mind of Zack Greinke and the pitching mind and how it all works. I mean, he really is. And we chatted for a little while afterwards. And, it's funny because I asked him, I said, hey, you want to come outside? And you can hear everybody. We're in the clubhouse there. And back in the day, I would get him to come out once each spring training and sit down. And he gave me this whole story about, I said, hey, you want to come outside? He goes, nah, when I used to do that, you got me in trouble. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he told me a story about, he talked about hitting AJ Przinsky in the toe, and it made the whole White Sox, like it got around, and it made the whole White Sox team mad at him. And he remembered that, and he was like, no, you got me in trouble. I said, so like you think Zach could be like, I'd be like, oh man, I was like, dude, I didn't even remember that. I said, now I kind of remember you talking about it. And he goes, I said, well, what about here? He goes, yeah, and here's okay. Right. Like, and I was like, okay, all right. And then he kind of thought about going out. He's like, well, I guess it's the same answering questions. I said, okay, so you're good to go sit down. Because I always like to get guys out of the clubhouse because you can put a headset on them. Their teammates aren't around them. They're just by themselves. They can focus on it. They're a little more relaxed, a little bit easier. And I thought I was going to get him out there, which he didn't do his last couple of years here in Kansas City. And he's like, no, we'll just do it here. Do you got something to record with? I said, always, buddy, ready to go. I mean, let's do it. And I talked to him for a little over 10 minutes, and it's just amazing. He's just so entertaining. If you dig into what he's saying and how he thinks, you kind of get a little bit of a window into why he's so good. I mean, didn't you feel like he was like kind of mad at analytics? Like he felt like he had figured these things out and analytics caught people up to him, like, didn't you kind of get that vibe?
Yes. There's a few things I want to talk about with this, which, I always have a few things to say, but especially with Zack Greinke. The first is I just want to take a step back and appreciate that he's here with the Royals one last season, quite possibly his final. But
I said, is this it? And then this is part of the whole conversation. And he's like, I don't know. It depends on how I feel. Maybe 1, maybe 3. So like, I was like, yes, like okay. Pitch well.
I'll be back. I'll keep my hopes up. Like at least, but I think I'm preparing if this is it, right. I've learned to appreciate the entire journey. I mean, the sheer delight I had when he re-signed with the Royals last year, which was a dream of mine, but I honestly did not really expect it to happen. And the fact that not only that it meant Zack Greinke was going to be in a Royals uniform again, but also kind of that whatever the relationship was between him and the organization was when he left, which, it felt like a little bit of a rift there. In reality, he did the Royals to one of the greatest favors any player has ever done. And the fact that he's come back, there's no hard feelings, that he actually really enjoyed his time here. That, with 3 young children, that he looked at Kansas City as a great place to sort of finish out his career when his kids are old enough to watch him pitch. All of that, it's a really lovely coda to what has been, a career that was certainly up and down at the beginning, but has really turned into a wonderful, unique Hall of Fame career. And one of the pleasures of being a sports fan is you can almost mark time by a player's career. And not just with baseball, it feels like more than other sports, maybe because they do sometimes have extremely long careers. We're not talking about marking months and days, and we're talking about years, generations. This is Zack Greinke's 20th season in Major League Baseball, which means, I'm 47 years old, and he has been in the major leagues for at least half of my memory. Right? That's an extremely long time. And I think I may have told this story before on this podcast. I'm not sure, but when he came up to the majors in 2004, my oldest daughter was 18 months old at the time, just learning to say her first words. And one of the first things I sort of taught her to say was to respond to me when I asked her, sweetie, who's the best pitcher in the world? Zack Greinke. Zack Greinke. He didn't just what was like one word, but this like 18-month-old adorable child that she didn't know what it meant, but she loved to say it because she knew it made her dad happy. And that child is now a college sophomore. She's going on to medical school, hopefully. She's 20 years old. Zack Greinke is still, if not the best pitcher in baseball, still an asset to any ball club that'll have him. And if this is it, I would love for the Royals to send him out, a winner, put him out on a playoff mound. But even if they don't, I'm going to really try to appreciate this season, watching him now, remembering the Zack Greinke that, was a 20-year-old pitcher in the major leagues, and just appreciating the entire journey with him as a pitcher.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, what you're talking about, it's really, this is a classic Zack Greinke quote, because buried within there is actually some profound wisdom, which is that when he started, what he said, they might tell you, don't throw this pitch because I saw the batter hit a home run on a pitch before, but the quality of analytics was terrible. What was pitcher hitter matchup data, meaning so such and such player is 3 for 7 with a home run off of Zack Greinke. That was considered like state of the art 20 years ago, and that was crap. And it was, and we said that their sample sizes are too small. It doesn't mean anything, and that's sort of what Zack is getting at. I remember speaking to Brian Bannister, actually, probably it was 2009 or 2010. So in the peak of Zack Greinke's career, still the first half of his career, but when he was probably the best pitcher in baseball. And this is when Brian Bannister was getting a lot of attention because he was one of the first pitchers to really delve into cutting edge analytics and talk about it publicly. Talking about, at that time, it was things like batting average on balls in play based on what the count was. So like his point was that, if you got the batter down in the count, even if he makes contact, you have some more command over batting average on balls in play. This is like analytics, not even entry level. This is like high school level analytics now. But at the time, that was the best we had. But I remember him telling me, I don't think I'm revealing any profound secrets now, but he was telling me he had these discussions with Zack Greinke, and that kind of introducing him to basically the fan graphs and Baseball Prospectus, right, and where you can get this data online. And it was really that first generation of active baseball players looking for an edge, doing some of the homework themselves. But what his point is that, from around 2010 to 2020, and that decade, the level of analytics progressed so far that now these guys are overwhelmed with data, right? We know every batter's weakness. This is the pitch he can't hit. This is the zone he can't hit it in. These are his batting averages in this situation. And I think the point he's trying to make is that it's a constant battle of information, because once you have all that data and pitchers know this is where this guy's weakness is, well, now it's the batter's chance to change his approach to the plate, work on his swing to eliminate the holes in his swing. It is a constant back and forth, constant war of adjustments on both sides. And so if you rely too heavily on the scouting report, this guy's, he can't hit the curveball down and in. Well, unbeknownst to you, he might have fixed that flaw in his swing. And so if you throw that pitch without, and it's not your best pitch, you might actually be, going right into his happy zone. So there's actually a lot of profound wisdom in what he said. And, he's there's never been a boring Zack Greinke interview. You did not break that streak. So good for you.
No, he is priceless. I talked to him about the touch gene, which I asked him about, like, why he could throw strikes. He only pitched in high school for like his last couple of years, and then was drafted right out of high school, and he was always throwing strikes, right? And in way back in the days, like, I've always had the touch gene. I could always hit free throws. I could always putt. I could do whatever. And I brought that up to him, and he just had this wry smile, and he's like, I don't have the touch gene quite as good as I used to. Like, just his mind, like, yeah, that was back in the day, but he still does. He still can paint, like few pitchers can. It's just great. I really enjoy Zack Greinke, and I'm so thrilled for all his success. I would love for the Royals I'd love for him to pitch for 3 years. The Royals get good and win a world championship, and let Zack Greinke be a part of it, because that's the only thing he hasn't done in his career. is to win a world championship. All right, do we want to hear Ned real quick?
Yeah, let's hear what the newest Royals Hall of Famer had to say to you.
This is so we had a Zoom press conference, for lack of a better term. Ned talked to us for about a half hour after it was announced that he had made the Hall of Fame, and so we pulled one of the answers on a question I asked him, just because we think it pertains to something Randy and I have been talking about for a while on here. That the Dayton Moore approach of and Dayton said it as we may not be able to spend more than other teams, but we can love our players more. And I brought that quote up to him and about how it works and how it applies. This is Ned discussing, how much that was a driver in their success and how it applies to today's baseball.
I think, Soren, that's another good question. I think that for me, I think chemistry is so important. And you can do, for me, you can actually do both. I mean, you look what the job that Andy Reid's done with the Chiefs. I mean, those guys love them. They worship them. They got a very tight bond. Their chemistry is tremendous, but Andy's on top of his game. They move players. They move players that they really don't want to move. Tariq Hill and LeMahieu and these guys, they moved key players, but you still care about the individual person. And that's what it is. They're not just numbers on a piece of paper. They're people like everybody else. They've got families. And I think it's really important. And I think that's where, Matt's on a good course right now in Kansas City about, giving the players a bit of a voice so that they can feel a part of what everybody's trying to achieve and everybody's trying to grow and everybody takes ownership of it. So I think it's vitally important. There are clubs that, the cold, the cold way of doing things, it works too. So it just depends. For me, I'm not really smart enough to understand which way's the best way. My way, I always felt it was important that you try to develop really, really good baseball players, but you try to develop good sons and good husbands and good fathers and good teammates along with it. And I think you can do both as long as your communication is open and honest. They understand where you're coming from. They understand that you've got their best interest at heart. And sometimes your best interest isn't the best interest of the organization, and you got to move on. And we're all upfront with that too. But I think it's important that you build a real strong relationship, and it's a trusting relationship. It's a relationship out of respect with the players. I think that's important.
I get a couple of thoughts because I've talked to Matt Quatraro a couple of times since I've been out here as well, and just what's your real? Let me hear your reaction first, and then I'll go a couple of places with what Ned had to say there.
So I think I generally agree with what he is trying to say. And he brings up the example of the Chiefs, and we already talked about them last week. And yes, like that, that it is not mutually exclusive to treat your players well, and also to have a loyalty to the organization first and the player second. Because part of treating players well, the two things that I think are integral are being honest with them. So not lying to them, not saying, oh, you've got the job and then taking away the job from them, right? If a player is becoming too expensive, you're talking about the raise. As you mentioned, Matt Quatraro specifically, the raise. There's no illusions if you play for the Tampa Bay Rays. If you're looking to go to free agency and you're going to make, big dollars, there's a good chance you're not going to make it there. But everyone knows that going in. So it's okay to not necessarily offer 10, 15-year contracts to every player. It's not a lifetime. It's not a marriage. Unless you're Wander Franco and you're willing to take that deal early on, and they'll pony up to $200 million if you're going to be a superstar. But most players, it's not a long-term marriage. But everybody knows what the relationship is going into it. Players don't seem to mind that. But then the second thing, you want to do right by your players, make the players the best version of themselves that they can be. And one thing that really comes out of the Tampa Bay philosophy and the news reports from the Rays is I've seen this many times with columns about how the players or the pitchers there especially feel truly blessed to be in that organization, not because the organization treats them well or because they're going to be there for 10, 15 years, but because they have seen from history over the last 10, 15 years how many pitchers arrived in Tampa Bay broken, or they're not prospects in the first place, nobodies, and the Rays turned them into really good major league pitchers. And if you're an athlete and you can go somewhere that's going to make you a better athlete, make you more successful at your job, that's the ultimate loyalty. That's the ultimate treating you well. You're going to want to be a part of that organization. It's not just about being part of a winner. It's about being a winner yourself.
Right.
And I think my hope is that is where the Royals are kind of going with bringing in Quatraro and Paul Hoover, the new bench coach, was also from Tampa Bay. There's the new Tampa influence is this idea that loving on your players means making them the best type of player they can be. And we have already in spring training, we can talk about this in a little bit, but we already have some quotes and some interesting data points on that subject.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you nailed it, because when I talked to Matt Quatraro about it, I brought that up, and I brought it up in his introductory press conference, and I don't think he'd kind of heard, that how big a deal that was with Dayton and how much that played a role and how Dayton went about doing things. And so he kind of just, when he answered, then I felt like he didn't really grasp. He didn't have certainly the context of how much we'd heard about that here in Kansas City, right? That was a big part of what Dayton thought was in the team building. And when I brought it up to him today, he seemed like he'd probably ask somebody like, what was that question about? Where'd that come from? And because he was immediately ready for it. And he said, listen, he said, we had that approach in Tampa as well. He said, caring about the players absolutely is a part of the equation. Like we and so I thought that was interesting. Like everybody thinks they care more than everyone else, right? Everyone loves their kids more than anybody else has ever loved their kids. And so I thought that was good to hear, because at least there's not going to be a culture shock. Like he's not like, no, commodities, they'll do what they're told. We'll tell them where to swing and when not to do, and move your finger this far on the baseball. Like he was not cold. And he talked about relationships and people. When I talked to Brian Sweeney as well, the pitching coach who's been around Terry Francona, obviously, which as has Matt Quatraro. I've talked to him about Tito as well, Francona, and Francona is very much a people person. And so any idea that like they're this cold group of people that have come in to just chop up the pieces and sell it off like it's a stolen Porsche, not the case. Right.
They're not. The owner of the Rays is a hedge fund guy, but they're not actually treating players like they're just assets.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that was great. And Brian Sweeney was great to talk to. And he gets that part of the equation as well. But but they also don't back away. And your point about like making them better, it's great if you want to hug a guy all the way into being released and then headed home to sell insurance or be a high school coach. But if you want to be good to a guy and honest with a guy and tell him where he's not getting it done and then showing him how to get it done. Brian Waters, the former all-pro guard of the Chiefs, said something to me that I think applies to all sports. And I remember talking to him when the Chiefs were down. They were really hurting. I don't know if it was the first year, one of the last years with Scott Pioli, but he said, listen, all you want from a coach is for him to make you better. If a coach will make you better, you will run through a wall for him, right? That's what you want. You want him to say, if it's an offensive lineman, listen, you gotta attack first, or your feet play, whatever it is. And in baseball is so much coaching, right? Like, listen, you're not committed to your fastball. You need to throw this more. This has a great break. Today, it's not like all that. And
honestly, I'll just say this. I feel like you talk about so much coaching. I think it's my impression of the importance of coaching is higher today than it was 10 years ago.
Yes.
We've seen more examples than I would have guessed of players completely transforming based on coaching and, yes, data and video and all this stuff, but ultimately that's all coaching. Like that players can transform more than we ever thought possible. I really, truly believe that.
Yeah. And listen, Brian Sweeney is like a ball of energy, a giddy, like super happy, excited to get in there and develop these guys and work with them and build relationships. And he talked about, with us about, first thing he did was go around and see all the guys. He flew to wherever. He said, JJ, get out the credit card. Right. And he's like, we got to get to know each other as people so that they can trust when who am I? Okay. This is a guy I like and I can trust. Okay. Now I'm bringing the data and the science and everything to it and can add that to it. And I thought it was really interesting. I mean, he very much talked about the people part of the equation. And then he said, that's first. That was number one. Who is this guy? Why should I listen to him? He said, I have to prove it. He said, I have to prove it and give them things, which I love because I'm thinking back like, okay, this is Brian Waters. How are you going to make me better? He's like, I got to make them better. Like we've got to have the things to really be able to get it. And so there's nothing I always love the honesty of baseball. It's such a much more honest sport than football. Who's always trying to kid themselves and everybody else. But it was the honesty and the acknowledging of what he has to do, how to do it, I thought was great. And yeah, so to Ned's point, that's still here, right? I think there was, I think back and I think it was a big part of what Dayton did. And I think he did care. I think there was a little bit of, I love my kids more than everybody else. I don't know how to quantify that.
No,
Everybody loves their kids.
I know
and
what you're
these
saying.
guys love their kids too.
And here's the thing, like everybody loves their kids, but you know what? There are some parents who love their kids so much that they never discipline them, that they never, and you end up, I'm gonna make another Harry Potter reference here. You end up with Petunia and Vernon Dursley. All right, for the listeners here, you end up with Dudley Dursley as your son. Like discipline, tough, not even tough love, but like honest love involves telling your kid, no, you're not always right. You made a mistake. You need to apologize for that. You need to correct this, right? Now you can go the other extreme and be cold and be, a domineering parent, and that's bad too, and it's probably worse than loving them too much. But it is possible. It's not that you love them too much; it's that you love them the wrong way. Is that you think that love is incompatible with discipline, with acknowledging their imperfections, and we've said this many times. Hope is not a strategy. Hoping your kid gets better, stops making mistakes, isn't going to fix things. And hoping that your pitcher is going to suddenly learn how to throw, get guys out with his below average curveball or whatever it is not a winning way to build a baseball team. And this is a good point. I just want to drop this in because we're talking about the green shoots, the positive signs. Yes, it's spring training, it's February, it's optimism, hope springs eternal, all that. But we've talked about how excited you and I are about new coaching instruction, a new way of doing things, and how this can impact the Royals pitchers. This is from Ann Rogers, who's our woman on the ground, the beat writer for MLB.com, Royals website.
She shared her sunscreen with me today.
Oh, well, she's okay. Then shout out to you, Ann. Thank you for keeping Soren out of my office. I appreciate that. Depriving me of some income. That's okay. But this is from her column today. She's got a couple columns up. This is one of them. It's about actually Royals coach Zach Bovey, the new, I think the assistant pitching coach, right? So Swiss Army knife. Royals coach Bovey has creative approach. So here's the opening. All right, the opening paragraph. During Daniel Lynch's bullpen late last week, the Royals lefty and his coaches emphasized refining the shape of his curveball. It needs to be a pitch with depth, covering the bottom of the zone. What Lynch was throwing wasn't getting the top spin he wanted, and assistant pitching coach Zach Bovey thought it might have to do with Lynch's middle finger coming off the ball earlier than the release. Bovey asked if he could move the Edgertronic video camera, which is usually set up behind a pitcher facing the plate, to the side. Bovey's hunch about Lynch's middle finger was confirmed through the high-speed camera that allows for a better view of grip, spin, and motion. Lynch adopted the cue by keeping his middle finger on the ball longer and started to see better results. Now, this column can go on and on and on, but I'm not saying with definitive certainty that the Royals weren't doing this before, but I can tell you I have not read a column about the Royals that started anything like this before. That opening right there is everything I have been talking about on this podcast for the last year. Right there. That's exactly what I wanted to see, what I wanted to hear. That's exactly the kind of improvement the Royals can make without bringing in new talent. With the talent they have, they've got They're very highly touted 2018 draft class. Those guys are still here. If there is a path for the Royals having a miraculous season this year, going to the playoffs, whatever, I've seen projection systems that have them as one of the worst teams in baseball. They may well be. But if there's a path to them shocking everybody, it is going to be through that. There is a path, and the path is exactly what I just read to you. And I'm, it's making me excited for the season.
I really like what I'm hearing around here. Hope springs eternal, right? It is spring training. You're right. I'm looking for positive signs, but to your point, I'm hearing a different approach, and the old approach wasn't working. And I'm going to tell you, Daniel Lynch. I talked to him for a while today too, and talking to him about talking to Greinke, and it really is. I mean, there's again, will it work? We'll see. Would I bet on it? Yeah, I came away after today going, I'm going to bet the over on the win total. I don't even know what it is. Whatever they're giving them, I'm going to take the over.
97.5, Soren. Good luck.
All right, maybe I'll hold off. But yeah, I've been quite impressed to say the least, and I think a lot of the elements that were very positive from the Dayton Moore time are going to remain. They maybe weren't quite as special as we thought when you hear Matt Quatraro say, like, we cared about guys down in Tampa as well. That's not going to change up here. And Brian Sweeney really, especially just talking about, like, not shying away from it. Like, I've got to make them better. We've got to, magnify what they do well and eliminate what they don't. And we're ready to do it. I thought was great. So just really good stuff so far from what I've heard here in Surprise, Arizona. By the way, always really good stuff when it comes to your parking lots. If your business needs any kind of help, again, Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They've been making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. That's even longer than Zack Greinke's been in baseball. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Of course, they are hiring as well. So if you're looking, great Kansas City company, growing all the time. One of the best places to work. I know I've gone to lunch a number of times with everybody. It is a great group of people to work with. Project managers, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience. Paid time off, insurance. That's just a few of the benefits to name. Find out more at ganasphalt.com. We want to touch on some of the position player battles. Where you want to start, Rany?
So there's several positions that, the starter is not completely set. But I think before I pick a position, I think we have to start with a specific player because he kind of impacts multiple positions. And that is, of course, MJ Melendez. Mm-hmm. Is he the backup catcher? If he is, then Freddie Fermin is probably not making the roster. But if he's not, then, Freddie Fermin is a guy with I can't remember the name of our longtime Ken Gallagher, longtime backup catcher. With him no longer in the organization, there is that would be Freddie Fermin's job to get. But the Royals are, in addition to working with their pitchers, they're working with their catchers too. Paul Hoover, who is the new bench coach, came over with Q from Tampa Bay, a bench coach / catching instructor. You're basically taking over Pedro Grifal's spot. But the Rays have some ideas of how you make your pitchers better by making your catchers better framers. And that is one of MJ's big weaknesses. And, ordinarily I'd say, well, it's time to move him because he was terrible in that role. But if the Royals new guys think they can fix it, I think it's worth giving him a shot, because if you can turn Melendez into an even average defensive catcher, he's Salvador Perez's, successor, and he's going to be a great hitter for a catcher.
And one of the things they're doing that they think is going to help is they're moving the catchers up. They're moving them closer to the plate because they feel like, which makes sense, right? Get the umpire closer. The ball breaks out of the zone and away. Well, the further back you catch it, the further out of the zone it is when you catch it. In fact, I'll share with you MJ Melendez got nicked on the hand on a I don't know if it was a follow through or if it was on the swing, and he was asked, well, is that because you moved up and this thing? He's like, well, it's baseball, it's part of it, it happens, it's part of catching and everything. But the conversation is very much there. And today was the first time I'd heard it out in the open. I've been hearing some rumblings about that. You and I have discussed it.
Right. So, but now they're being open about it.
It's
Okay.
a little. I heard him specifically being asked by somebody else about it. So that is one of the ways that they think that perhaps they can help the pitch.
And I think that's really interesting because it sounds like when you first told me, I was like, that seems like a pretty basic thing to do.
Sure.
But the Rays, one of the things that makes the Rays successful is they don't assume the basics. Like sometimes having the basics down cold is actually, is worth more than trying to find edges, find little advantages on the edges, right? Like if moving up it seems like a simple thing to do, but if simple things sometimes can bring you a lot of success. And the reason I find this interesting is J.J. Cooper of Baseball America, long time writer there, great guy. He actually had a Twitter thread this past week and also wrote an article specifically about the Tampa Bay Rays and how it seems like every pitcher they bring into their organization, one of the things that stands out is how their pitchers immediately start throwing strikes. Their walk rates drop immediately. I mean, even like mid-season trades, Tyler Glasnow, I believe, who they got from the Pirates a few years back and was a very talented but very wild pitcher with Pittsburgh, immediately came over, cut his walk rate like from his first start, and turned into an absolutely fantastic pitcher. I think he blew out his elbow, and so he's still working his way back to full strength, but is like a tremendous pitcher. You know what their secret is? They have catchers set up in the middle of the strike zone, and he's showing video evidence of like Tyler Glasnow as a Pirate. He's setting up at the bottom of the zone. They're aiming for the corners. They're trying to get, pitchers to like throw quality, throw it in a quality part of the strike zone. But you know what? Most pitchers are not Zack Greinke. They can't necessarily hit the corner every time. Sometimes they can, but if they miss 30% of the time, 30% of the time the ball's below the strike zone, the batter's not swinging, it's a ball, you're behind in the count. Set up, and then goes to Tampa Bay immediately. The catcher's sitting up much higher, and the 0-0 pitch now is suddenly a strike a lot more often. And then if you get ahead in the strike in the count, then you can start getting the batter to chase down, pitches down in the zone. But you got to get ahead first. And it was reading this, it made me smile because it tied in exactly what you're saying. It's a simple thing. But do the simple things first, then worry about the complicated stuff.
It is amazing because I think like you want to feel like you can impact. If you're a coach, you want to feel like you can impact. But if you've got a guy that's got stuff and got movement already, like you want it to start in the middle and then break out, right? Like and I think they get guys with stuff and then they want them to paint this corner.
Right, exactly. If they've good enough stuff,
let stuff do the work.
Right.
Stop negating the stuff.
The first time I ever heard about this, I'm going to go really old school now. I got to look up to see. I think it was 1991. Juan Guzman. I don't know if you remember Juan Guzman.
Oh, loved him. Great Jerry curl, Blue Jays.
Right.
Yeah.
He was a phenom, really. Came up in 1991, looking it up here, 123 starts, 2.99 ERA. And then the following year, 16-5, 2.64 ERA. The Blue Jays win the World Series in '92. Following year, his ERA went up, but still, he made 221 innings, 3.99 ERA, which is still above average in that era. The happy ball was starting to show up. They won another World Series. But here's what's interesting: he was in the minor leagues, not really a prospect. He was with the Dodgers for many years. The Blue Jays got him, I think, in a minor trade. And I remember when he got called up, not a top prospect at all, and just immediately came out of the chute as like a phenom. And what was it? He had great stuff throughout the minor leagues, couldn't throw strikes. And I remember vividly, the Blues were like, we're just telling him to throw it down the middle. His stuff is so good, it's not going to end up in the middle. So we don't have to worry about him hitting, throwing cookies. But it cut down on his walks. His walk rate dropped, and he was unhittable. So this is not like you're not reinventing the wheel. Sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just put wheels on. The Royals for so long have been driving a car and worrying about, the interior finish, and the wheels are not on right. So hopefully with Quatraro and Brian Sweeney and Zach Bovey, all these guys, Paul Hoover now, get the wheels on, because man, if there's one team that could really benefit from having pitchers throw strikes, take a look at the Kansas City Royals pitching staff from last year, and every one of these pitchers that disappointed, their walk rate was too high. Right?
Yeah.
It's basically Zack Greinke could throw strikes, Brady Seager could throw strikes. Not coincidence. They were really the only two pitchers on that team, starting pitchers certainly, who were quality. Everybody else had command issues. So it's and hopefully, I mean, that'll be one of the first signs that we can rely on, because walk rates stabilize pretty quickly. So like you might know early in the season, in April, if we see walk rates down significantly, we'll have a really strong indication that the Royals have made some positive changes.
All right. Now for the position battles.
Yes. So Melendez is the question, right? Because if he catches, then that was one spot. If not, though, is he playing left? Is he DHing? Like it affects a lot of different people.
I'm hearing catcher left is like what they're thinking about, and they're maintaining that you can get better as a catcher while playing left.
Okay, well,
I want to believe it.
This is one of those reasons why I was like, when we, as optimistic as we are about the Royals, it's like, okay, maybe 97.5, you bet the under, because there's still some issues here, but it will be certainly interesting to see how that goes and see by September, is catcher still in his future, or is that project over?
Yeah, no doubt. So that's a big one. We're looking at catcher. Where else are we looking?
So that plays into the outfield, because really all three outfield positions are sort of in flux as to who's the starter. But I would say when you talk about position battles, I think the big one is center field, because that'll filter down everywhere else. Are they going to go with Drew Waters, or are they going to go with Kyle Isbell? And they're on some level, they're kind of similar players. I mean, they're both young, unproven. They both have good defensive skills. They both have offensive questions. We saw Drew Waters last year, and when he came up, it was brief, but we saw a lot of promise there. The strikeout rate was a little bit troubling, but he certainly showed he was potentially an everyday player in the major leagues, which we didn't know when they acquired him. Isbell, his defensive numbers have been just phenomenal at all three outfield positions. And if Isbell can hit, the problem is Isbell's really not shown the ability to hit. The Royals, it did him no favors by being aggressive with promoting him. This is a guy who missed, much of 2019 with an injury. Then the 2020 was the pandemic year, didn't get on the field. Came back, played AAA in 2021, and was good, not great, for 3 or 4 months. And then they brought him to the major leagues, and he may have just been rushed. I still think there's a bat in there. And if he can be even a league average hitter, I think he could be a phenomenal defender. I think Drew Waters can play center, but I think Drew Waters would be a really good defensive right fielder, or potential left fielder. So I think I would like to see Isbell win the job. I don't want him to get it by default, but if he plays well enough to deserve it, I think that would be great. I don't think Drew Waters would be poorly served by going back to AAA for a month or two, and dominating down there before he comes back. But that will affect, because then in right field, if you have great defensive center, can you play Edward Olivares in right field? You could go with Waters in right and have a really good defensive outfield, but I think this is the chance the Royals need, that opportunity to let Edward Olivares play every day and see, can he actually hit well enough? This is a year to figure out who these guys are. And I don't want to come out of this year still not knowing if this guy can contribute to a major league team. So Olivares, I'd like to see him play every day somewhere. And then maybe you get your defense in center.
Is MJ Melendez, you're like, do we factor him in as the starting left fielder? I mean, like, ideally what we'd love to see, right, is maybe MJ Melendez and Salvi going back and forth between DH and catcher, right? Because Isbell, Waters, and Olivares have grabbed the 3 outfield spots in some way, shape, or form, right? That's ideally, that's the best case scenario, right?
I think so. I mean, if they're playing Melendez in left, then that takes that away. But and I understand they don't want to turn him into a DH yet, but frankly, if you're going to have him catch 70, 80 games a year, you might be better off having him DH the rest of the time, so he doesn't have to learn two defensive positions. He can always learn, if you turn him into a full-time left fielder later, if you give up on catching, he can learn left field, in an off season. That's okay. But I'd almost rather they do that. And I think, because I also think it'll help them defensively, because having the last thing you want is Olivares and Melendez manning the corners. Maybe they'll end up, what I see them probably doing is having Melendez play left and having DHing Olivares on the days where he's not catching, which can work. But again, I just worry that having Melendez try and remember the defensive nuances of 2 different positions is just going to lower his chances of figuring out how to play either one of them.
For sure. All right, where do you want to stop next?
Well, I'm gonna skip the one position I don't want to talk about. I'll save that to the end. The other one, I think the other main position battle is second base, right? Which is Michael Massey or Nicky Lopez.
Well, I thought I figured that was the one you were wanting to save for the end.
No, the one I want to save for the end is the one that the incumbent is not somebody I really want to discuss too much, but we'll get there. I mean, to me, it's ultimately, can Michael Massey, win the job? I think Michael Massey has the higher upside. I think he's an underrated defender. And I think, I want to see.
Is he underrated? I mean, he was a minor league Gold Glove winner, the equivalent.
But nobody talks about him as a good defensive second baseman. But his numbers were average, which is fine. If he can hit 280 with 15 home runs, I'll take average defense at second base anytime. It will be very interesting to see now that the shift is being banned, and it affects the positioning of infielders. It does mean range is a little bit more important. You can over the last 10 years, teams compensated for guys with bad range with good positioning. You can't do that anymore. And I'm hopeful. I'm still skeptical the banning the shift is going to have that much of an impact on the game because it doesn't actually impact strikeouts, which is the real problem. But I do think it can be a benefit if it means teams value defensive ability more, because the game is more fun when you see good defensive players, not just a guy who happens to be standing in the right spot when the ball is hit at him. So, the Royals will need a good defensive player there, but I think Michael Massey can do that. And Nicky Lopez, look, I'm a big fan of the guy. I think he's a good player. I think we know what he is. Like, we know what his skill set is. The question is, he was at the top end of his skill set in 2021, hit 300. He was kind of at the bottom end last year, hit like 240. And that's the difference between being a really valuable player and being a utility guy. But I know what his skill set is. He's probably settling in around like a 270 hitter. That's what he's 270, no power, plays defense all over the place. He's great in a utility role. He's a little overqualified to be a utility player, but ideally that's what he would be. But Michael Massey, I don't know what he is. Is he a starter? Because when you can only play second base, and that's primarily where he's played, it's tough because if you aren't good enough to start, you're not good enough to be a bench player. You don't have a lot of backup second basemen on your roster. You need to be able to play shortstop if you're going to be on a bench in the major leagues in an era where there's only 4 or 5 position players on a bench. So we need to find out, can Michael Massey actually hit enough to play every day? I'd like to find that out.
Yeah. All right. And Michael Garcia, you don't see a scenario where they go all defense.
I'd love. I'm one of his biggest fans. I'd be surprised if he wins. Like, if you want to put out the name of who's the one guy most likely to be the surprise of spring training and win a job when he started spring training, nobody expected him to do that, it's probably Michael Garcia. I mean, in an ideal world, Michael Garcia wows everybody. They start him at shortstop because I think he's still the best defensive shortstop, and they move Bobby Witt to third base. I do not expect that to happen on opening day. It might happen in July, but not on opening day. Having said that, could Michael Garcia open at third base? Because that's the position where he who must not be named is scheduled to play, and that's Hunter Dozier. And I just don't. I really want to see someone else win that job. Nothing against Hunter, but defensively, he's never been a good defensive third baseman. He's never hit well enough to justify, except for 1 year. And unfortunately, the Royals have basically made him the default starter because they haven't brought in a ton of competition. Johan Camargo is maybe going to make the team. We've talked about it, you and I. Nate Eaton. Where does Nate Eaton fit on this team? Right. They tried him at third base, and he's a tremendous defensive outfielder. So it's kind of a waste. But if he can even become an average third baseman, maybe you go with him. But that is to me the one real hole in this lineup where I don't know what kind of production they're going to get from that position.
Isn't it? I want to make sure of this because I know a couple of years ago when I'd have this conversation about Hunter Dozier, it was definitively his best position as far as his offensive numbers. Now it's also where he came up. There's a lot of things that go into that.
I mean, I think a lot of that is just the year that his best year in the major leagues was the year he happened to play third base. I don't know if that's means that he hits better there or not.
Defensive positions, his OPS by defensive positions, tops, pinch hitter, 1.208, 1,200 OPS.
Hey, I'm all for him being put in that role too. So
second, first base, 759. Third is third base, 748. Then DH, 745. Right field, 709. And then 401 in left field. Left field, he has 86 plate appearances. The rest are 232 or more plate appearances. I mean, is it possible that, as much as they're not going to admit it, that this year is about hopefully getting Hunter Dozier off to a hot start? Like, okay, let's just put him where he played his whole career. Let's try to get him off to a hot start, and we'll flip him for whatever we can get.
That's probably the plan. I just worry that falls into the hope is not a strategy category, because this idea that even if he starts out well, this assumption that some other team's like, oh yeah, we'll take that guy who's been terrible for 3 years and is making $17 million over the next 2 years off your hands because he got off to a good start. I really think that the team that he has the most value to, unfortunately, is the Kansas City Royals, and or the team that values him the most right now. So I am skeptical. I get not wanting to just release him at this point, but they're going to have to, if he does not get off to a hard start, they're going to have to make that decision come June.
Let's keep in mind $17 million in cost, but this is not the Glass family who was not willing to eat money. I from what I've been told, that's not how ownership views things. It's about resources, not about making
the man who gave him that contract is no longer the GM. So yeah, you can make that decision and wipe your hands clean of it without any, real implications for the people left behind. So
yeah. But don't we expect a lot of guys to play in a lot of spots? Like Matt Quatraro is coming to, like, everybody, they're going to be looking at the numbers. This guy's got the advantage here, and this guy's got the advantage there. And so, there'll be days where you're like, why are they doing that? And then you'll go down and you'll look at, and maybe it'll be something we can't see. And some of the more, basics, sites that are available to those of us that are baseball fans, but you'll be like, oh, okay, he hits 575 against that guy for his career, or, for whatever reason. Like, we expect that to be much more of, as opposed to, these are our everyday guys. This is what we play. And it's on Sunday afternoons that we see the backups. Right?
Yeah,
they're going to mix and match a lot more.
Yeah, no, I mean, the defensive flexibility of this roster could be really immense. I mean, when you talk about guys, even if they don't play it great, I mean, Hunter Dozier can play a bunch of different positions. MJ Melendez, you don't find a lot of catchers / left fielders in baseball, right? Nate Eaton is a Swiss Army knife. He can go almost anywhere. So if he's on the roster, you're going to see a lot of that. Nicky Lopez can play anywhere in the infield. So yes, I think, and Quatraro, hopefully, coming from the Rays, I think understands the idea of resource allocation and putting your players in a position to succeed, which means catering, their strengths and weaknesses, and putting players, having a guy play 70% of the time or 40% of the time, but having a plan that I'm going to use him in the 40% of situations that he is best suited for. So yeah, hopefully at the end of the year, you're going to have a lot of guys who've got between, 300 and 450 plate appearances, but not because of injury, but because they actually had a plan. And that's a way to find out about as many guys as possible as well.
All right. Anyone else? Anywhere else you want to hit?
I think that's plenty. I mean, what haven't we? What have we done? I think Pasquin. I mean, Nick Prado could win a job. Another guy who could kind of upset the apple cart here. Right. We're just kind of assuming he's not, but he's going to have to win a job. I think Pasquantino is your first baseman, unless if Prado makes the team, maybe he'll DH. But Pasquantino's got the job locked. But honestly, there aren't a ton of guys who've got jobs locked. Salvador Perez, Bobby Witt, presumably at shortstop is locked. Pasquantino. That's kind of it. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys who we know will play, but who will play every day at a certain position. I don't think we know. That's part of the fun of spring training. And that's part of the fun of having new people in charge. Right. And for the first time in a long time, Soren, guys in charge who I actually have a reasonable amount of confidence in that. If they make a decision, even if we don't necessarily agree with it, we're going to at least try to figure out why they're thinking what they're thinking, and not just, be dismissive of it. So I may have to check my ego even more than usual this spring training.
Rany, you're the man. Great stuff as always. Always love talking Royals baseball with you. I will continue to wear my sunscreen every day that I am here in Surprise, Arizona.
Thank you, Soren.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Covering the spring training, and we'll do it again next week, my friend.
I look forward to it.
He's the man, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. Of course, our Kaufman Corner podcast brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC Metro, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They do it all. Everything comes with a written warranty. That's right, each job. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and they're hiring. So if you want to be a part of a great team, a great Kansas City company that's growing, be a part of Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're hiring project managers, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more information. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining.